to the required standard quality control laboratories. So what that means is that we need to increase investment in this area, upgrade the available quality control laboratories, and where there's none, consider construction of these laboratories. And on top of that, we also need to build capacity in medicines regulation. So we talk about the human resource training here. It's important that we get to upgrade the qualifications of the human resource that are in national regulatory authorities to give them the capacity to adequately and effectively regulate the medicines and vaccines. We also need to improve on technology aspects to allow these institutions be able to detect falsified and substandard medicines. When we do this, then we get to a point where we can have confidence that most of the products on the market are of the required quality. The other angle you can have a look at is the aspect of the manufacturers. Here we are talking about improvement of pharmaceutical manufacturing on the continent, but we do know that we have some of these manufacturers already on the market, on the continent, manufacturing these products. The issue that has been there is that most of these manufacturers have not attained the required GMP standard. And that is why most of them keep on just producing for the local market. They are unable to export the products that they manufacture. So the key as far as manufacturers is concerned is to assist them to attain the required GMP standard. This requires investment as well. It's an expensive process and will need a lot of money, and also requires training of the staff that are within these institutions. So again, you will note that the issue of human resource capacity keeps on coming up. And I saw a question earlier on the chat, do we have the capacity? The capacity there is potential for development of human resource. And that's where I think for everyone involved in this process, we must try and focus. We have to start from somewhere. We are not yet at the level where we want to be, but we see, because of the interest, a number of institutions, academic institutions, are beginning to introduce these programs to respond to this need. And as indicated earlier, the link between manufacturers and institutions to ensure that the correct curricula is developed also becomes important. Manufacturers also require other aspects as technology transfer, so linking them to highly developed manufacturers outside the continent and within the continent, that becomes important. So if you look at manufacturers from two angles, those that are already existing, we need to assist them to develop their GMP standards to an internationally accepted level. For the new companies, manufacturers that are setting up, I think the message is clear that there is need for them from the word go, design these facilities in a way that allows them to meet the acceptable standard. So we see all these things as well. For these things to happen, I think at the center of it, if you look at it, we need desirable policies that are supportive of the investment in the pharmaceutical sector. And because of what has happened on the continent due to COVID, we see that there's a lot of activity trying to ensure that the environment is very good. And the supporting partners are also coming in to have a look at how can we really increase pharmaceutical production. So looking at these, supporting investment in the pharmaceutical sector, so linking them to affordable and sustainable investment will then allow them to design their facilities and improve on their processes to meet the required GMP standards. And that then allows them to expand their market, because they will now be able to export to different. Now they have to have a look at the entire continent and not just within their country boundaries. So that's quite important. And what needs to happen then is that all these sector players need to design, we need to have a holistic approach and begin to move in the same direction. A coordinated approach that involves all the sector players is going to be very, very important. I'll end here, Ebe. Thank you. You are muted. We can't get you.
Hello, I have been talking to myself. So I said, thank you so much, Dr. Muller. That was really a very nice way to sort of end the formal presentations. I don't know if Bramwell is still in the room, because he was going to talk about technology. But if not, we will go straight into sort of the conversations. But one of the responses, there's been several responses about manufacturers. So I was going to ask William Ofori, who used to be the former regional director of AstraZeneca in the West African region, thinking about, and I know you have been working with some manufacturers in the region, what are the kind of key issues from the manufacturer's perspective? William.
Hi.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And I believe quite a bit of it has sort of been highlighted by the former speakers. And I know that Olaf in particular mentioned a few, so I'll just highlight it. But as we're talking about manufacturing in Africa, on the African continent, I think one of the very key things is the personnel. So as much as we're talking about funding and everything, we also have to look at the personnel and how do we put all these structures in place to make sure that we're ready to compete. And in terms of personnel, we're looking at highly skilled professionals, across the spectrum of manufacturing. And then we're also looking at the mid-level technical personnel who are on the manufacturing floor, as well as, building all the necessary skills that go in the whole pharma value chain in terms of personnel. We're looking at the regulatory personnel, the expertise in Q and quality control, and also all the product assurance across the spectrum. Then we're looking at building this whole local capacity in terms of tech transfer and knowledge transfer. Then the infrastructure, when you look at putting up ultra-modern plants, the technology, the engineering, the concept design, and the proper manufacturing setup is something that we have to look at. And all this vis-a-vis go with the whole governance structure and the financing. And then also in terms of product sourcing, what will we be looking at in terms of APIs, raw materials, the whole supply chain right through to the end. And then there is also the aspect of the whole contractual arrangements that go within the industry. So in terms of that, they are the aspects of the contract manufacturing, the in-licensing, and also the agreement frameworks that go within this. So take vaccines, for instance. If you're not developing your own vaccine, you'd have to look at, the licensing and the right to produce. So we need to look at all that. Then where is the market? Both the domestic and the regional market. And within the continent of Africa, how does the AFCFTA, the AFTA, play? And how possible is it to have a governance system where you can trade seamlessly across the region? If you take the advanced world, you would actually have one product being manufactured across 3 countries, where the API is produced here, the manufacturing is done in one country, and the release and QC is from another country. How does Africa put its framework together to be able to compete in that? Along all these, there's a lot of legal partnerships, stakeholder agreements, co-manufacturing arrangements, supply chain, and also taxation issues, that come to play in the whole industry requirement. Then finally, if Africa is to leapfrog, we need to look at the future of the science. So expanding our product range, if you look at a lot of the African manufacturing plants, they're doing basic things. Basic manufacturing of, painkillers and blood tonics and basic antihypertensive tablets. But manufacturing is getting more sophisticated. So that is why we were found wanting when it came to sterile injectables like vaccines. So where are we in terms of developing our product range and product scope there? What is our R&D future looking like? How will regulatory support all this? And then when you come to, patency issues and IP, then how does the private-public partnership work out? Then there's also the collaboration with big pharma as well as academia. So these are all things that we need to consider when we're looking at the governance, the value chain, the investment, and the financing in the pharma spectrum in terms of manufacturing in Africa. In brief, that's what I put on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, William. That's sort of a very complex list. And when we talked about capacity, two of us focused on technical capacity, but you also talked about the different types of other capacity. So legal partnerships capacity, during the COVID pandemic, many African countries did not have sufficient specialized legal capacity to effectively negotiate vaccines on behalf of their countries. Vaccines before they had at the time when people were purchasing vaccines early. And so I think the issue of specialized capacity is not just technical capacity, but it's capacity, like you said, for all the partnerships in the academia and areas developed. But saying that, I'm going to Dr. SSG. I don't know if you're still on. There's a question here for you. And the question, hello, I don't know if SSG is still on. Dr. Ekuem, are you on?
I'm here, please.
Okay, thank you. So I think there a question, I would ask you a question. I don't know whether you have other questions now that you've listened to the other parts of the audience. But if a specific question was, what's, you talked about the telemedicine, policy in Akwa Basi, Ibom State. And so did this extend to hospitals and community levels? And secondary, has this worked? Are doctors able to communicate using telemedicine? And the third, I think which is mine, linked to the conversation we're having. What about issues of pharmaceuticals